Hello and welcome to the latest in our Platform Insight series of interviews. I'm Nicola Hayes, Chief Marketing Officer here at Platform Markets Group, and we're at Platform UK today at our third annual event. I'm delighted to have Thor Johnsen with me, who is Managing Partner at Digital Gravity, but also now looking after Gravity Edge, I believe.
Yes.
Tell us about that, because that's a seismic shift from an infrastructure fund to then be working on the operational side of things.
Yes. So we saw this gap in the market of saying, look, how as a investor, asset manager, can we be most impactful in building platforms, to take a cue from your theme, and to build out, especially in this like heady market we're in within data centers, but to build out mid-cap businesses really from an asset by asset level. And I think one of the things that we've realized where we've been most successful in building businesses like Vern, Aquacomms, a few others, is to really kind of get hands-on with the operations. And so for us, Gravity Edge, it started with an asset, and we're building from there. And being at that operational layer is really critical as we think about alpha from an investor perspective, about how do we make the most impact, both in identifying assets, but then really delivering the investment thesis from there. If we think about a lot of investments with data centers, whether it's greenfield or brownfield, depending on how you define that, ultimately the majority of investment is in the CapEx, is in the development spend. And so having a kind of a mind for that and being intimately involved with that is just something that has to come, I think, intuitive to an investment professional in this space. I think of it in some ways, a parallel would be for the investor audience out there. Often when you start in your career in investment or investment banking, you learn how to do models, right? And you're financially modeling everything. And if you at some point you have to step away from that. But if you lose sight of the model, you lose sight of your comfort value with that, your comfort with that model. Ultimately, I think that you start to lose grip with like, okay, what's going on? How do we really understand this investment? So in some ways for us, it's like, getting in depth with the details, understanding what's going on in the coalface, still working with consummate professionals, on the engineering side, whether it's mechanical, electrical, whatever it might be. And we think that's really where we can make the most impact as an asset management investment team.
It is a shift though. We've seen this, we were chatting obviously before we started this interview, and we've seen this approach from the real estate side of things, but not necessarily from the infrastructure fund side of things. So what in the market has shifted to make this suddenly viable? Because when you start talking about it, it's obviously a no-brainer, and it makes perfect sense. Yes. But it's also something that we haven't necessarily seen from your side of the investment side of things until recently.
Well, I think it's, first it's defined by the broader market opportunity. It's, we are, nobody needs to, go repeat the numbers, but just the level of growth. And ultimately some of that growth is coming in, maybe it's slightly unusual ways. When power becomes constrained, you've got to be more creative about it. So that's one dynamic. I'd say also is that as we think about development with these assets and development risk, we were chatting about that, really bringing in that real estate perspective is critical. And that's what we did with Gravity Edge with our JV with BlackRock, is they understand development risk, they get it. And then working with an industry partner, working with an operating partner who understands and is, really gets into the weeds of it, is kind of a really good marriage. And for us, that's really what gave rise to kind of this, okay, let's move into this and really tap into our skill set and work with actually real estate capital. What we find is that, like, especially if you think about where investment capital has come from in the data center space over the last decade, obviously infra funds have really played a major theme in that. Well, ultimately, what they're good at is buying companies and really, creating that right operational framework, ensuring that there's better operating leverage as you continue to grow that platform.
But usually without actually getting in the weeds with that operational piece.
Board level, and ultimately not building the business from ground up. But because of the broader market opportunity, we say, look, we can continue to do this. We've done it before across the digital infra space and in data centers. but now let's just do that. And so our first strategy is Gravity Edge. It's focused on metro data centers. It will be greenfield, but primarily right now it's brownfield. We're seeing we bought an 11 MVA site in West London, quite a bit old, so we've had to refresh the MEP. We've now converted that into a 25 MVA site. That's also capable of modern workloads. So, and that's obviously a big theme in the industry is, moving away from low rack density into higher rack density. So now we have 15 megawatts of IT sellable that can go, that is, capable of doing very high rack density. So.
The edge piece, right? It's in your name. It's in that thing. Why the focus on the edge piece? And I said on the brownfield, particularly in the UK, do you think that's the way the industry has got to go with the constraints we've got across the rest of the infrastructure piece at the moment?
Yes, and so I absolutely. So one thing we are not is doing small remote edge, right? We have I'm involved to help start a wireless business doing real edge work, but very, edge being to your mobile phone, edge to future automobiles. So what we define edge as really having that low latency access into core metro hubs and ultimately eyeballs. And because of that, we've said, look, does that need to be a megawatt, or should we pursue things that are a little bit more scalable? And so we've defined that as a few megawatts up to 30 MVA actually. And for us, it's all about identifying where power constraints are in FLAP-D or other tier 2 cities that we can deliver that level of service. So that's one level of it. Another level of it is to say, where is this future compute going? And we do see that, especially with AI and GPU compute, having access to latency is important. And it's right now, a lot of the AI is obviously focused on more model training, less inference. And actually, a lot of the inference workloads that people aren't really, maybe not, we often think inference, so you need low latency. Well, actually, a lot of inference today, you don't need low latency. But we do see in the enterprise market that requirement for low latency inference compute is dramatically increasing. And we think that's a really interesting market to provide compute for.
And this has been a bit of a bugbear of mine for the last 12 months, is I think we've been focusing so heavily on the supply side. And all the conversations, whether it's the investment community, the real estate community, the operator community, that supply side. Yeah. We haven't spoken about demand for years.
Yes.
And that demand ultimately comes from enterprise.
Yes, it does.
Do you think that's actually there yet?
Yes, so we do see enterprise demand picking up. Now, some of that clearly will go through the cloud component, either public cloud, traditional public cloud, or neo cloud. And that we think is going to be a theme of, probably the back half of 26 into 27, where you're seeing enterprise really push forward their demand for compute, either within the public framework, public cloud, the traditional public cloud, or neo cloud. And I think that's where it gets really interesting for what we're looking to do on the metro side, particularly as it veers into either direct for private instances or neo cloud. And I think that's ultimately we see enterprise absolutely being at the bedrock of all our infrastructure requirements that we're selling.
Yeah. And finally, when we're sat here this time next year, what do you think we'll be talking about?
That's a very good question. I wish you had prepped me for that one.
Oh, I never prep people.
No, but I think it's going to be a continuation of some of the same themes. Some of this is going to be what I just referenced, enterprise and inference really starting to hit its ground. We hear a lot about AI, but the actual requirements of compute in the business cases are going to start to come through. I think that's the positive side of it. I think the negative side of it, the glass is half empty side of it, is I think some of the mistakes or fumbles will become more apparent. I think there have been some in the industry. Sometimes they get covered up by just general growth. Some of those will start to be defined a bit better of why they've been mistakes or whatnot. And secondly, I'd say, as an industry, I think we are going to be more awake to the reality that we will become public enemy number one if we don't take a more active, rigorous engagement with the community.
Absolutely.
Not supporting charities, but doing active engagement. How does our data center, actively support the industry? Some of that's education, with what's, our use of the iPhone requires this, and some of the benefits of all that. But also just fundamentally of like, okay, as a big, are we heating the sky, or are we going to do stuff for the district, right? And I do think that's going to, we've got to keep pushing on that. And otherwise, that half-empty scenario where we're like the new tobacco industry is going to start to become more pronounced. And if you ask that a different way, what do I worry about most? It's that.
That one. I think that's an absolutely awesome insight into that, and I think it is a really critical point over the next 12 months. Thor, thank you so much for joining me for our coffee and chat on our lovely sofas here, and I will catch up with you again later.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.